Welcome to episode 3 of the Game Warriors painting series. In this episode, we'll be painting the Abominalpha from Cool Mini or Nuts Zombicide Black Plague. Let's check out some of the painting steps. First, we're going to prep and prime the miniature in Army Painter's Matte White. Then we'll be applying the base colors in two separate stages, followed by shading and highlighting. We'll be shading the miniature with one type of ink, highlighting any area that had been too darkened by the ink, and doing some dry brush over the alpha's skin. And finally, we'll move on to finishing touches. Finishing touches will include painting the base with some light colors, adding some texture paint to give a cool, icy effect. Let's get started. In stage 1 of the base coloring, I'll first be using Army Painter's Wolf Gray. I'll be applying this all over the ripped and torn cloth. Then I'll be painting all the exposed bone and skulls with Army Painter's Skeleton Bone, followed by painting the Alpha's horns with Army Painter's Monster Brown. Then I'll be painting parts of the fur with Army Painter's Uniform Gray. And finally, I'll move on to painting the Alpha's claws. I'll first be using Army Painter's Ash Gray to paint his claws on his hands, and then using Necromancer Cloak to paint his claws on his feet. I added a few drops of water to my paint for smoother coverage and help it better penetrate the deepest recesses of the miniature. The Alpha is a very detailed miniature and has quite a bit of bones protruding out of its skin. The ones on his legs I almost missed because of how small they are. It's always helpful to look at your miniature in different light so you can see some of the details that you might miss in other lighting sources. Since the majority of the Alpha's color is white, I wanted to break up that color by using some dark gray on the fur on the arms and the mane. By doing this, I added some contrast between the two different types of fur and really helped bring out the amazing details of this miniature. Now that we finished stage 1 of the base colors, let's move on to stage 2. In stage 2 of the base colors, we'll be combining equal parts of Army Painter's Centaur skin and Army Painter's Crusted Sore. We'll be using this combination to paint the inside of the Alpha's mouth and tongue. Then we'll be using Reaper Miniatures Master Paint, Tainted Skin. We'll be using this to paint all the ripped and torn carcass that the Alpha is wearing. And finally, we'll move on to painting all the chains that are attached to the clothing with Army Painter's Shining Silver. When painting the ripped flesh on the Alpha, I wanted to give it a really worn and ripped apart look, so I just painted small sections on the Alpha and still let some of the original base color shine through. Now that we're finished with the base colors, let's move on to shading. For shading, we're going to completely cover the entire miniature with Army Painter's Zombicide. When using any wash or shader over a miniature, you want to use a decent amount so it can better penetrate the deepest recesses of the figure to bring out the details, and wipe off any excess onto a paper towel. Now that we've finished shading the alpha, let's move on to highlights. For the highlights, we're going to be doing some painting and dry brushing with the original base colors over any area that was too darkened by the shader. Then we'll move on to doing a dry brush over the alpha's skin with a 2-to-1 ratio of both Army Painter's Hydra Turquoise and Army Painter's Matte White. By dry brushing this combination of colors over the alpha's skin, we'll be creating an icy blue tinge. To really help bring out the details of the alpha's fur, I first started by doing a dry brush of the original base color. Then I moved on to doing a dry brush with matte white to really bring out the details and make them stand out, and to help it better blend with the overall miniature. To help bring out some of the details of the Alpha's horns, I did a light dry brush and painted select areas with Army Painter's skeleton bone. When dry brushing, you don't want to apply too much paint. To help avoid this, you want to wipe off any excess paint onto a paper towel until your brush is relatively dry. Then with even strokes, you want to drag the brush across the top of the miniature, catching all the raised surfaces. Now, as you can see, after I did the dry brush, the Alpha came out too blue and looked a little too much like a Smurf. To help better blend this, I went back over with the dry brush of the original matte white to smooth out any areas that were too darkened by the blue and help better blend the two colors together. To achieve the glowing effect of the eyes, I first diluted Hydra Turquoise with 2 drops of water. I did this so it would flow better into the cavity of the eye. Once it was dry, I painted a small dot of white on the eyes just to make it really stand out. Now that we've finished with the highlights, let's move on to finishing touches. For finishing touches, we're first going to paint the base with Army Painter's Crystal Blue, followed by doing a rough, wet blend of Hydra Turquoise and matte white. Once those paints have dried, we're going to cover the entire base with Citadel's texture paint, Agrellan Earth. And once the texture paint has completely dried and showed cracking, we're going to do a rough dry brush of matte white over the top, thus creating a snowy, icy effect. And there you have it, the Abominalpha is complete. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. Stay tuned to future episodes when we'll be painting more miniatures from Cool Mini or Not's Zombicide Black Plague. And as always, happy gaming. I'll see you around.